George Galloway was the Labour Party representative in Parliament from the city of Glasgow beginning in 1987 till 2003 when he was expelled from the party by Tony Blair over the Iraq War. He describes himself as Britain's most outstanding political figure and is currently a prominent columnist, author, and host of the mother of all talk shows on YouTube. Please welcome George Galloway. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Jimmy, and congratulations on those outstanding achievements. I had a few after I got expelled myself. I won twice as an independent against Tony Blair's Labour Party and spent almost 30 years in the British Parliament. So I recognize a high achiever, and you, man, are really breaking records. 1 million subscribers on YouTube.
Thank you.
100,000 on Rumble. Well done. You deserve every one of them.
So I'm glad we have you here with us because Claire Daly, who's one of our faves, she gave a speech about the Iraq War, and I wanted to play it. It's only about a minute long. Let's play a little bit.
We have just passed the 20th anniversary of the Iraq War, a war where over 1 million people died, where people still grapple with the after effects of the use of depleted uranium, where nobody has been held to account, for a country torn apart and a region plunged into chaos. And we have a responsibility to look back and ask, how did it all happen? Well, it happened because the people in power told us over and over things they knew were not true. It happened because a compliant media failed to ask the questions and parroted those lies day after day, beating the drum for a war of aggression dressed up as a battle of democracy against authoritarianism. So now, as another country is torn apart, another region turned into chaos, at this uniquely dangerous phase in world history, we see the same people again, baying for blood, not their own of course, seizing the moral high ground, condemning peace as appeasement, bellowing that the only option is escalation. Well, you really have to ask yourself the question, why in God's name would we believe these liars now? We need peace and we need it now.
Now, I just wanted to, let's bring in George Galloway on that. Now, why she reminds me of what you said to the Senate and in the United States. Now, why is it there's only a handful of people like you that it seems to be in the United States, there's only a handful of people that speak out like that?
Well, she is Joan of Arc. She is La Pasionaria, Dolores Eberuri. She is a fighter of the very first rank, and that speech ranks with any anti-war speech that I have heard. And the reason is she's got courage. She does not want anything from the power, and nothing that matters to her can be taken from her by the power. And that's what's required. Moral courage, moral fiber, as my old mother, nearly 90 years old, would call it. The ability to say that there are some things greater than self and sacrifices that may need to be made. They're not, after all, asking you to sacrifice your blood like other people. They're maybe asking you if you're prepared to sacrifice high office for speaking the truth and standing up to power. And that's what Claire Daly does. It's what I tried to do in the US Senate in 2005 in a speech, an occasion that has lived, partly because, as you say, it's not often repeated. We have the misfortune to live in a time of moral dwarfs, of pygmies in the international political arena. Which means that those of us who are at least a little taller than a dwarf can stand out against the prevailing landscape. But that time will pass, Jimmy. Our children will have more courage than we, more knowledge than we, and they will change the world. Of that, I am certain.
Well, I want to play your speech that you gave in 2005 in front of the U.S. Senate. They were investigating the UN's Oil for Food program in Iraq prior to the war, and you're speaking directly to Republican Senator Norm Coleman. So this is pretty powerful. Let's play it.
Now, Senator, I gave my heart and soul to oppose the policy that you promoted. I gave my political life's blood to try to stop the mass killing of Iraqis by the sanctions on Iraq, which killed 1 million Iraqis, most of them children. Most of them died before they even knew that they were Iraqis, but they died for no other reason other than that they were Iraqis, with the misfortune to be born at that time. I gave my heart and soul to stop you committing the disaster that you did commit in invading Iraq. And I told the world that your case for the war was a pack of lies. I told the world that Iraq, contrary to your claims, did not have weapons of mass destruction. I told the world, contrary to your claims, that Iraq had no connection to Al-Qaeda. I told the world, contrary to your claims, that Iraq had no connection to the atrocity on 9/11/2001. I told the world, contrary to your claims, that the Iraqi people would resist a British and American invasion of their country, and that the fall of Baghdad would not be the beginning of the end, but merely the end of the beginning.
Wow. So that was 2005. That was you then. And you became, so you got kicked out of the party for being so vocal against the Iraq war. That's what happened with Tony Blair?
Yes, and when I came to the Senate, I had just been elected as an independent candidate, defeating a pro-war Tony Blair Labour Member of Parliament, and I did it again in another city called Bradford in 2012, which showed that we're not alone, that if with the proper application of courage and having kissed the Blarney Stone in Ireland several times when I was a child, the ability to string a few sentences together, you can win the hearts and minds of people. The liars don't always win. And all the signs are, and I'm very optimistic about this, is that the liars are running out of steam. Who anywhere is listening to the braggadocio of Mike Pompeo right now, or the blinking stupidity of Antony Blinken? Who's listening to the drooling senility of Joe Biden in the world anymore? People are jumping off the American train at quite a rate of knots, including passengers that we never imagined would. The kings of Saudi Arabia, for example, are only the latest to do so. So the tide has turned. Times they are changing. And the first one now will later be last. Of that, I'm sure.
Well, here's something. This is from a guy named Richard Haas. Now, he's an American diplomat. He's been president of the Council on Foreign Relations since July 2003, prior to which he was director of policy planning for the United States Department of State and a close advisor to Secretary of State Colin Powell in the George Bush administration. And he says this, he tweets this out: the U.S. did not launch the Iraq war 20 years ago based on lies, nor did it go to war for oil or Israel. But the 2003 Iraq war was an ill-advised war of choice, a bad decision badly executed. The U.S. and the world are still living with the costly consequences. So what do you say? What do you say to something like that when he said he doesn't actually tell us why we went to war? We were supposed to believe that we actually went to war because we believed the lies about Saddam Hussein having. We all know those were lies. We know how Dick Cheney would make up that lie, and then he would feed it to a reporter named Judith Miller, and then Judith Miller got for some reason, was able to print whatever she wanted on the front page of the New York Times. And then Dick Cheney would go on Meet the Press and say, hey, the New York Times is reporting that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. But he just planted that story and he knew it. And so everybody knows. So that's the game. That was the game. And we all know about the prospect for a new American century, right? Which they had, well, at least General Wesley Clark admitted that they had all planned on invading all these countries before 9/11. They had a list of all the countries they wanted to invade: Iraq, Iran, Libya, the Sudan, Somalia, and Syria. And so let me just throw it to you. What do you make of when someone like this says that?
Well, I'm familiar with Dick, as I called him, back then as now. And whilst there's more rejoicing in heaven when a sinner doth repent than when those in no need of repentance, it leaves a bitter taste in the mouth because, of course, these were the very people and their counterparts in the war media who took us into that disaster, as Claire Daly just inimitably said. So at least all of them now accept that it was a bad decision. We told them it was at the time, if only they had listened to us. But that's of interest now only to the historian. Except in this regard, I'm wondering why so many people are ready to believe the same kind of lies, often from the same liars, always from the same platforms, about every subsequent war, including the ones we're now in. That's the point at which I despair about the human condition of some, if not many, that a man who now tells you that he was entirely wrong about something of such consequence, which led to the deaths of millions, which cascaded fanatic hatred across the world, which gave birth to ISIS, which led to 10,000 beheadings, explosions, terrorism all over the world. The people who got that wrong now tell you that they're getting Ukraine right. Now tell you that they're getting Taiwan right. They're getting the Persian Gulf right. Well, you know, I know that the American dream, you had to be asleep to believe it, but you'd have to be crazy to believe these people who are now proven liars and admitting that they got this completely wrong. Talleyrand was once famously quoted when a friend told him that one of his enemies had committed a terrible crime in invading a principality somewhere, said it's worse than a crime, it's a blunder. And this Iraq experience was both a crime and a blunder. And that is unforgivable.
Well, I like what Tim Anderson tweeted out. He said, right, a well-meaning war of aggression. No lies were told. And, of course, he shows Colin Powell, of course, lying at the UN. There was all pack of lies, and we find out that, you know, nobody believed it. And that's just how you sell a war. And that was his job, to sell a war. And Colin Powell was a war seller. And I don't know why a lot of people gave that guy credit for nothing. He was not a hero.
Took a lot of balls to tell that lie.
It took a lot of balls to do that. So a million people got killed because of that. And you know, I don't want to let off. It's the same stuff, right? So now you see Ben Stiller, and you see who's the other the guy from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. What's his name? Sean
Yeah,
Penn.
it's not just like the same
You see
people.
Jon Stewart. You see all
Yeah,
these.
right.
Go ahead. What?
It's not just that, like, they're kids too. Yeah, like Cheney's kids.
Cheney's kids, right? And so now I just want to remind people that just like the same thing now, you know, you turn on The View. They're very pro-war. They're very pro-censorship. They're very, all that stuff. So now we'll show you, here is Margaret Kimberly reminds us that Oprah Winfrey was helping sell the war.
Even Oprah got in on the act, featuring in October 2002, New York Times reporter Judith Miller.
The U.S. intelligence community believes that Saddam Hussein has deadly stocks of anthrax, of botulinum toxin, which is one of the most virulent poisons known to man.
Liberal hawk Kenneth Pollock
And what we know for a fact from a number of defectors who've come out of Iraq over the years is that Saddam Hussein is absolutely determined to acquire nuclear weapons and is building them as fast as he can.
And the right-hand man to Ahmed Chalabi.
And so, do the Iraqi people want the American people to liberate them?
Absolutely. In 1991, Iraqi people...
I hope that doesn't...
As if the people in Iraq want America to come bomb the shit out of our country. No, they don't.
Didn't that guy Chalabi end up aligning with Iran in the end too, by the way?
I don't know, man.
I think he switched up.
Oh, did he?
Yep.
So let's watch. So somebody in the audience actually pushes back against Oprah and watch this.
When one guest dared to express doubt, Oprah would have none of it.
I just don't know what to believe with the media.
Oh, we're not trying to show you propaganda. We're just showing you what is.
This is what it is.
Okay, you have a right to your opinion. You know what I mean?
Wow.
We're not showing you. This is the truth. And how does Oprah know it's the truth? She has no idea. She has no idea that she's a pawn in a CIA plot to decapitate the Iraqi government and install a puppet regime and steal their natural resources, and then go on to do that in Libya and Syria, 20 years in Afghanistan. And she didn't know that she was just a pawn, just like Jon Stewart when he pins a medal on a Nazi at Disney World, just like Sean Penn when he goes over there, just like what's his name? I just said
Ben Stiller?
Yeah.
Ben Stiller, who I love. Ben Stiller. Such a great. I love that guy. But again, I don't understand how these people don't know it's the exact same thing. It's the exact same playbook. And they're all being used by the CIA and the military-industrial complex to foment murder for profit. Kurt, you want to say something?
Do you remember how hard she was on the guy that wrote the fake drunk book?
Yes.
And she couldn't believe the balls of him to lie about that. The extent of his addiction.
I do remember that. Yes. George, and now, before I bring George back in, I just want to show it's currently happening today. Now, here's the news. Here's a news reporter talking to a congressperson who's actually speaking truth and sanity about the Ukraine war. Watch what the news person does.
Now, you're asking what happens if we just pull out of Ukraine.
Right.
Let me ask you a question back. Why can't we push for a peace deal in Ukraine?
But then
why is war the only answer?
The Russians will be rewarded with territory for invading a country.
I'm sorry, Ukraine is not the 51st state of the United States.
No, but
so there it is in the United States. We have, that's supposed to be our top news show, 60 Minutes, and they're just full top of their lungs, full speed, 240, going for pro-war narrative, and not a skeptical question about the pro-war narrative. Do you think she would say that? Yeah, why are we in Ukraine? You think the reporter would say that? That's the congressperson, and then the reporter's like, we gotta be in there, we gotta have war. And so now you know why this is acceptable to Americans. These are the American military bases all around the world. That's how many military bases there are. If you spin the globe, they're just everywhere. Look at all the ones we have around China. Look at everywhere. Every part of the globe. You can't get away.
What if they attack us?
Even in the middle. What if we get attacked right there? Look at all the ones in Central America.
Yeah, we got
Look at all the military.
They're spreading democracy.
It is unbelievable. Look at this. This is surrounding Russia. Russia, Iran. Look at this.
The only thing I've ever seen this thick pop up is if you go on the sex offender app. It's about as many as there are military bases.
So let me bring back in George Galloway to comment on this crazy upside down world we have, where the entire media is on board for more war, and people are okay with this kind of military expansion, imperialism. That's just what it is by the United States. And by the way, this is the way all empires end. America's ending now. George, go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, to paraphrase Donald Rumsfeld, it's not America's fault that these countries have placed their land so close to your bases. The reality is that the empire is overextended, just like the Roman Empire ended through overextension, through the debasing of its own currency, through its moral and societal degeneracy, through not being able to, in the end, pay enough to the local satrapies to keep them in the empire team and so on. All of these things and more are actually being played out right now. And the birth of this new world, this multipolar world, is taking place in front of our eyes with such rapidity that it's quite startling, even for someone like me who spent a long time, all of my life, fighting for this very outcome that has now hoved into view. The old world is dying, the new world is being born. We do live in a time of monsters, yes, but the monsters are fading. And the new world, the India, the BRICS, the Iran, the Latin America, the Africa that I've just been talking about on my own show this evening, 1 billion people with all these treasures underneath their soil, and they haven't even started looking in their waters yet properly. All of these places will, in the lifetime of our children, be powerful, rich parts of a multipolar world, the era of Anglo-Saxon domination. For that is what it is, Jimmy. The West, as we loosely define it, including Australia and Japan, neither of which is remotely in the West, is only 13% of the population of the world. And moreover, many of the people in the 13% wholly oppose the use, and many more have not received a penny or a cent in benefit from the period of our domination. But it is rapidly coming to an end because the emperor, to continue my Roman metaphor, has no clothes. And more people can now see it, and more people are ready to say it.
Well said. Go to jimmydore.com to see my new stand-up special, COVID Lies Are Funny. For only $10, you get to become a premium member, too. And come see us do our live shows. We're going to be doing stand-up comedy in Milwaukee, Nashville, Honolulu, Los Angeles, Northampton, Massachusetts, Syracuse, New York, Cohoes, New York, Hartford, Connecticut, Baltimore, Maryland, and more. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all those tickets.